So, starting off in Washington, D.C. this morning, welcome to World Conflict Zone. This is the morning long coverage of conflict news updates for October the 3rd. So, let's move into our first piece of news for this morning. So, we're going to start off in the country of France. So, via X, we've been able to report that Macron has stated the following: Europe is now in a confrontation with Russia. So, at the informal EU summit in Copenhagen, Denmark, hosted by the Danish Prime Minister, Macron declared that Europe is now in a state of confrontation with Russia, citing Moscow's escalating hybrid threats, including disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, and airspace violations. And these are direct challenges to European security. All right, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda. And that moves us to Oslo. In Oslo, here is a reported visual of the USS Gerald Ford. Now, this is the only video I've been able to find on this. Moving on to the Czech Republic. So today they're having their general election. And the reason why this is important to report on is, no different than Moldova. There's been some reports of some Russian interference potentially happening for them on election day. So as the day progresses into the evening hours and they start to conclude their election and the results start coming in, it'll be interesting to see what developments happen within the country of the Czech Republic. Moving on to the next locale. So yesterday afternoon, early evening, I was able to report that Munich International Airport had unidentified drones have been reported, and the Munich airport was shut down overnight. Well, reports indicate as of this morning that the airport has been reopened. However, no updates on info relating to this drone sighting, how many there were, or where it came from, or what it looked like. As more information trickles out on some concrete evidence to this, I will report accordingly. Now, let's move on to the Zaporizhia Oblast. So, and you see this whole general area, and I have it highlighted out for a reason. And let's just kind of get to the details here. According to Sky News, the armed forces of Ukraine, with intelligence support from NATO and the United States, are preparing a large-scale offensive campaign using kamikaze drones and cruise missiles, which may be followed by a ground operation likely aimed at the Russian-occupied Kherson and the Zaporizhia Oblast region. And you see Dnipro over here, okay, Mariupol. It just gives you a nice broad map of this area in question. Okay. Now, it's also been reported that this may include Crimea right here. Okay, so this information emerged after President Donald Trump ordered the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to help Kiev carry out strikes on targets inside Russia using long-range drones and missiles, and asked NATO allies to participate in identifying targets for Ukraine. In addition, negotiations are underway over the possible transfer to Ukraine of long-range cruise missiles, including Tomahawks and Barracuda. Given the U.S. has only a very small number of land-based launch complexes for Tomahawks, and that integrating those missiles onto Ukrainian F-16s or even Mirage 2000s would not be feasible. It is less likely Washington would transfer them to Kiev. Most likely, the European funding, the U.S. will provide Ukraine with JSSM or JSSMER type air-launched stealthy cruise missiles with ranges of about 370 kilometers. which are integrated onto F-16s, in which Ukraine would be able to employ far more easily. And the reason why this latter part of the information is, you've probably at this point seen a lot of reports coming out about U.S. potentially providing Tomahawk cruise missiles, and Putin's made comments saying, if those are provided, there's going to be some appropriate responses to that. And really kind of both sides of the fence here are, is the U.S. going to, or are they not going to? And so this report that's reported is basically saying it's highly unlikely that's going to happen. Whether it's because the U.S. is backing out and doesn't want to do that, or if it's more logistically difficult than what's being reported, okay, initially, and there may be a little bit more a different approach to it to be able to provide the same cause and effect outside of Tomahawk cruise missile usage in itself. Now, I want to cruise in a little bit closer in this area. We've been able to report that Russia has published a video of them striking the electrical substation, Russian supposedly, which provides a nuclear power plant, Chernobyl, with power. So as you see in this video right here, if reports are accurate, this is a video showing that a Russian strike blew up the electrical substation, which essentially houses this nuclear plant right here. And the encasing is very important to essentially keeping, it's really essential to keeping the safety of this nuclear facility from having another nuclear fallout of some nature. So that's why this is important. That's what I was trying to do earlier, but I failed to do it. All right, so let's move on here. So I wanted to report on Moscow. And in short, with Moscow, it's just continuing reports of gas shortages in and around Moscow, how it's getting worse and worse. And, the government has tried its best to protect Moscow so that it doesn't have a perception that there is a gas shortage, as they work to secure being able to export some gas into the country. And, if you're not already aware, within probably the last 45 plus days, 28%, if not more at this point, of Russia's oil refineries and pipelines have been struck. Some of them repeatedly every time they get them back online. And it's definitely becoming a problem for Russia as a whole. In the western part of the country, in places such as Crimea, St. Petersburg, other small towns, and now it seems to be more and more prevalent in the city capital of Moscow. Now let's go to WRLD. So every year in WRLD, they get together, and in getting together, it's called the WRLD Forum, and it's the event that's held every year, and it's a think tank platform, okay, that Putin participates in. So you've heard a lot of comments, or you may not be aware of some of Putin's comments that he articulated at this forum yesterday. So I'm just going to kind of go through, but essentially it covers items such as U.S., Gaza, NATO, Ukraine, and Russian culture, and his status as a leader. So here are some of his finer quotes, if you will. We don't have UAVs that can reach Lisbon. We have long-range ones, but there are no targets there. That is why it matters. President Putin jokingly on drone incursions into Denmark. Oh, I think we've had enough fun with drones for now. I promise no more drone launches in Denmark. We wouldn't want to spoil their beautiful landscapes, would we? The global economy cannot function without Russian oil. Without it, prices would skyrocket. Some people are preparing nuclear tests. If they do a test, we would also do a test. Russia twice declared the readiness to join NATO and was refused both times. I am not an emperor. I am a president elected by popular vote for a certain term. Russia is the U.S. second largest uranium supplier. And interestingly enough, Putin has made the following comment. Russia earned about $800 million last year from selling uranium directly to the United States. Ukraine continues striking areas around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, but claims not the facility itself, as well as Russia's claim that they have not done anything to Chernobyl itself. Putin on France's tanker arrest. So there was a cargo Shadow Fleet tanker, and it's essentially the one that's being accused that that potentially drones had flown off of in the Baltic Sea, and France was able to intercept this cargo vessel, board it, and they've accused it of not operating properly, and they wouldn't identify what country of origin or flag that they are operating from. So Putin made a comment that Putin on France's tanker arrest, that's piracy. Putin also made a comment about Kirk's murder in the U.S., saying it was disgusting and a sign of the country's deep divide. Finland and Sweden have lost the benefits of neutral status. So those are some of his general comments. Now, moving on to the United States. So wanted to report that there were some planes that were up in the air, or reported up in the air, also known as the Doomsday planes. So essentially what these are is reconnaissance and security and surveillance planes, as well as nuclear bases, if you will, that are in the air. And so that they can operate at a capacity away from land and be able to move in a capacity during a nuclear warfare. So they were just kind of doing their test. Okay, so that's been reported. Now moving on to Venezuela. So the U.S. Navy gathered 9 warships, including an aircraft carrier, around the coast surrounding Venezuela. And that's been reported as of late last night into this morning. Now moving on to the Pentagon. So I wanted to report that with about 20 minutes left to close last night, both the closest Domino's and Papa John's and the second closest Papa John's to the Pentagon were reporting very high traffic for orders. And that was as of 11:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night. Generally, when the activity for carryouts and pizza orders closer to the Pentagon, it means there's a lot of people working late and into late hours. And when folks do that at the Pentagon, there's a reason for it. So therefore, that's why I report on it, because it's a trend. Okay, so now let's move on to back to Venezuela, into the capital. So Venezuela has reported that 5 U.S. jet fighters entered into its airspace and considered it a provocation. So a little bit more details on it. And the visual that you're going to see, I don't believe that it's necessarily real. I think it is a fake video for clarification of from Microsoft Flight Simulator with some type of backdrop. But it gives a visual representation of an F-35. So the Venezuelan government announced that it detected 5 U.S. F-35 fighter jets around 75 kilometers off its coast, calling it a threat to national security and a violation of international law. And basically are talking about propaganda actions. As well as we've been able to report the movement in Venezuela of several Venezuelan S-125 Pechora 2M surface-to-air missile systems were observed near Maracay in northern Venezuela, after Venezuela alleged that U.S. fighter jets had started flying near its borders. And here's a short little video clip of you see this movement and what what it looks like. All right, let's move on here, folks. So now we're going to move to Puerto Rico. Excuse me, I got ahead of myself. So we're going to report on the U.S. Navy in the Baltic or in the Northern Sea, Baltic Sea areas. So last night it was reported that a P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol and surveillance aircraft was carrying out some odd paths, covering areas such as right off the coast of Kaliningrad earlier, and then over northern Poland, then doing circles over the Baltic Sea. And now it was observed doing circles off of the coast of Estonia. So by now, if you haven't heard, there's been a lot of buildup of United States troops, aircraft, essentially a lot of training exercise happening off of Puerto Rico. And so what I want to do is take a minute and give you a visual of the two bases in which this is occurring. So the first one right here is this Ramey Air Force Base. This is the first one. And here's a visual of it. Okay. Now, if we were to zoom out, it's in the northeast portion of Puerto Rico. So if we were to go straight up, that's north, down towards the bottom of my screen, south towards the Venezuela coast. You see northeastern quadrant. Now, if you were to look right here where it says U.S. troops, okay, that is the other base in which they're operating from. We're going to zoom in to give you a visual of this area and the airport in question. And the slang term for this area is called Roosevelt Roads. So now I'm just going to kind of do a 3D view of it, just to kind of give you an area of the general vicinity and the airbase and some of the islands and the coast area and the beach area itself. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to reset due north. We're going to zoom out. And as you see, it relies on southeast, and then this other base is northwest, British Virgin Islands. And then if we were to zoom in and then start going due south, you can see it in proportion on the map. There's Aruba, and then here's the Venezuelan coast with the capital residing here. So I just wanted to kind of really give a visual of what we're looking at here. Here's Trinidad. I love to live in these areas. It's just absolutely beautiful waters. But either way, let's move on to the Mediterranean Sea. That the USS Gerald Ford, the largest and most advanced aircraft carrier in the United States Navy, is on its way to the Mediterranean Sea. This movement appears to align with heightened U.S. naval activity amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. So I've only gotten one source on this, so we're going to have to wait to see if more information comes out. Between Iran and their nuclear situation, as well as, right now we're all kind of waiting on updates on the Gaza peace plan deal and, what that looks like. So, I think some of this information is really hyper focused on Iran, as it should be. But as well as on a side note, we also have, really 2 days, because Trump had given a couple of days for Hamas to respond to the peace plan that Trump had laid out to the world. And speaking of Gaza and that area of the world, let's go ahead and move on to Qatar. So Hamas has expressed some concerns with Trump's Gaza peace plan, noting several points of contention. However, they do plan to officially respond in the next few days on an agreement or not officially. So that's incoming. Now let's move on to the Gaza area. So at least 63 Palestinians killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza in the last 24 hours. These are reports from really the health ministry within Gaza. So now let's move on to the West Bank. So you may have heard from the United Nations General Assembly and Netanyahu and the Israeli government talking about the annexation of the West Bank. So I want to talk a little bit more about the West Bank because so much focus has been on the Gaza Strip for good reason. However, what's gotten lost is the West Bank. And West Bank is another area in which the Palestinians and the PLO resides. Israelis reside in that area as well due to past settlements. But this is the area in question that you're hearing about being annexed by the Israeli government. So I want to talk a little bit more specific on this area and sort of a visual for you, the viewer. So some backdrop here. Israel are currently removing mountainsides to create more living spaces for Israelis. Widespread demolitions and land expropriation. So, what has been the general trend this year? Well, from January to September 2025, the UN and humanitarian organizations documented an increase in demolition of Palestinian structures for lack of Israeli issued building permits. These demolitions have displaced thousands of Palestinians. Settler outposts, and this is the critical part here, is the settler outposts. There has been an increase in the establishment of new settlement outposts, which involve clearing land. Some of these outposts block access to Palestinian grazing land and water sources. This ongoing land clearing is viewed by critics and some international bodies as part of Israel's strategy to expand Israeli control over the West Bank and undermine the possibility of a viable Palestinian state. So now let's get a little bit more specific here on some of these areas. So I zoomed on to this area of the towns, right? And you see East Jerusalem to the left here, and this area is about 7 kilometers east of East Jerusalem. Okay, now let's get a little bit more into Gaza. So at the Ashati camp, and it's really right here in the center, the park, and then just to the northeast left here. It's been under Israeli aerial fire this morning. Now, moving on to South Korea. So, been able to report that South Korea is preparing for a new critical scenario, a possible attack from North Korea that could occur in the late 2020s, especially if the United States becomes involved in major military conflict over Taiwan. So essentially, they're running exercise to prepare for multiple scenarios because they're very concerned about not only how North Korea would react or if North Korea decides it wants to do something and take some type of military action towards South Korea at that time. So they're really kind of working on different military scenarios and exercises because they suspect there may be some escalations again in the late 2020s, according to this report. That's all I have to report. And if you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button for this video. And if you want to see more such as this, please subscribe and thank you. And more importantly, thank you. This was my first run as an official video with some upgraded visual representations. And I do understand it may slow things down just a tad bit, but my hope is that the visual allows for greater flexibility and more engagement in the future. So bear with me as I work to tweak it and make it a much more improved experience for you, the viewer, as we review long formatted breaking news each and every day. So without that further ado, thank you very much for watching. It's an honor.